Net absorption shows you that the situation in most of these communities is bad and getting worse. I have no idea what they're doing right in Minneapolis because it's too cold for anybody to live there. But at least for now, they seem to be doing better than most of us. So here's the stat that's going to start to be really important to you guys. This is what's happened to rental dollars and what's happened to the vacancy level. So you can see since 2006, the vacancy level has more than doubled in Phoenix. And in that same period of time, the rent has gone down by about 10%. That seems like there's a disconnect there, and there is. And we're going to get into why there's a disconnect. The fact is there's more to the story than just dollars. And we're going to talk about some of that stuff. But at the on the face of it, that's what's happening. One of the reasons that rent isn't coming down is because there's a rent squeeze. Rents can only go so low. And once they go before that, people just stop doing deals. They're just going to give it back to the bank. So people who say to me, well, it's better to lease a building at $12 a foot than not lease a deal at $20 a foot, they don't really understand the economics. The landlord doesn't make any money at $12 a foot. He'd rather give it back to the bank than to pay the money that it takes to put you into the building. New carpet, new paint, TIs, pay a broker, give you free rent, have his management do all the work involved in getting you into the building, new signs, all that stuff. Takes time and energy, and if he's not going to make a fair return for that, he's just not going to do it. So we're going to talk to you about this rental squeeze. It used to be rents were $25.60 a foot. Of that, typically $12 was debt service. That assumes he bought the building for $200 a foot. He has a 6% interest-only loan. On top of that, he has $7 a foot in operating expense. That's taxes, insurance, common area maintenance, utilities, janitorial, the things that it takes to run a building. On top of that, he's going to spend $2 on tenant improvements. $2 isn't very much. That's new carpet, new paint, move a few walls. That's not taking a law firm space, breaking it down and building it back as a dental suite. That costs a lot more. But for this analysis, I'm going to say $2 a foot for tenant improvements. So additional transaction costs, abated rents, advertising, commissions, attorneys, accountants, whatever he has to do to make the deal, work out to about $3 a foot. The difference is $1.60 in profit, okay? That's the way the market was when the rents were at $25.60 a foot. Now look at what's happening today in today's market. Today we're seeing average rents of $22.48 a foot. He's got the exact same debt service. He paid the same what he paid 2 years ago. He's paying a bit more for operating expenses just because we're 4 years later and things have gone up in price. So he's paying, remember this it was in 2007, now we're in 2010. So operating expenses have increased. So now we're paying $8 a foot in operating expenses. TIs, he's spending $3 a foot in TIs. Why? Because he has to give you guys more TIs to induce you to come to his building. So he's spending 50% more on tenant improvements. He's got to give away a lot more free rent. He's got to spend more money on advertising. He's paying bonuses to brokers like me, and he's doing everything he can to make deals, and so he's now paying $5 a foot in transaction costs. So the net result is a $5.52 loss. So when you look at these prices in 2007 and you say, he was offering rents at $25.60 then, and he's offering $22.48 now, you go, well, I didn't really think about it, but you're right, he is losing $5.52. And part of it's because he used to give you hardly any free rent, and now he gives you a bunch. He used to give you no free parking, and now he gives you a bunch, and those costs all add up. And that money has to come from somewhere. So that gives you an idea of what this rental squeeze is, and that's why we're seeing buildings sort of reaching a bottom limit and just saying we're not doing any more than that. And we're relatively close to that bottom limit now. Now, asking price doesn't tell the whole story in terms of rents. We told you that the rents aren't coming down very much. They've come down about 10%. But we are getting lots of goodies through negotiation. So the concessions that when I think about rent, I don't think of it the way you guys do. You guys think about, what do I have to write a check every month? And I recognize that's important to you. But I look at it in the aggregate, and I look at rents per square foot, because I want to know that a 2,000 square foot tenant, a 10,000 square foot tenant are getting effectively the same deal. So when we look at effective rents, we really look at rent per square foot, and we look at the effective rent, which is the average amount of rent you pay over the term. So free rent will reduce the effective rate. If you're paying $25 and you're getting 10% of your term free, you're effectively paying $22.50. So that's what I look at. So the concessions we're getting are free rents, which will reduce their effective rent. We're getting more and more TIs for those landlords that have the finances to do the TIs. We're getting parking charge abatements. Contraction and expansion rights. Landlord's giving you the right. We just did a deal for an 18,000 square foot advertising agency, and we built in there a clause that says, you know what, if things don't go right, we have the right to shrink down to 12,000 square feet, and we're not paying you a penalty to do it. Actually, we paid a little penalty, but not very much. Extension rights. We have the right to renew this lease, not at a market, but at a price we're going to set today. You're going to give us free storage for our files in the basement of the building. We're going to get deferred operating costs. Whatever costs to run the building, I'm not going to pay it this year. I'm not going to pay the operating costs for a year or two into the future. We're going to give you an interior design allowance. There's buildings that have health clubs in them. We're getting free memberships to the health club as part of a lease. Early terminations. You sign a 10-year lease, you have the right to cancel after year 6, again with a penalty, but a relatively small one. So you start building in some flexibility for yourself. So there's issue after issue that we can come up with, that we can get landlords to give us concessions, that even though the rental rates won't drop, the value of the deal will be better for you guys. We're going to compare 2 buildings. This is a deal that we did in a Scottsdale A+ building in June of 2008, and another deal we've done in the same building in the last 8 or 9 months. In June of 2008, the rent started at $31 a foot. They went up at 3% a year. They ended up at $37.02, which was $1.425 million. This was a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot deal, 5,000 square foot deal, I think. Now, today, a similar sized tenant, $26 a foot. They didn't go up at 3% a foot. They went up at 50 cents a year. So we come to an end rate in year 7 of $29. So the new rental number, the exact same building, basically the same suite, same kinds of finish and build outs, was about $275,000 cheaper. But like I said, that doesn't tell you the whole story. Then we got 3 months of free rent. The value of that free rent was $46,500. Today we got 12 months of free rent. That works out to $156,000. Then we got $40 a square foot worth of tenant improvements. That's where the landlord built out the space for us. Today we got a turnkey allowance, about $58 or $59 a foot. Last tenant had to write a check for $18 a foot to get the TIs finished. This tenant got the TIs done at the landlord's expense. Parking is something that's really overlooked by tenants. On the last deal, the tenant paid $80 a month for parking and $60 a month for covered unreserved parking. We got this tenant 24 months free, and then we paid for 4 covered reserve, and we got 10 spaces unreserved free for the term of lease. And if you run the numbers on the differential between those two, it's a pretty big number. In the last deal, we got an $8 expense stop. The landlord paid the first $8 of the cost to run the building. And this year, the landlord said whatever it costs to run the building, not only for 2010, but also for 2011, we'll take care of it. You just pay what the increases are in 2012. So if you add that up, by the way, the parking I talked about, that number is $51,000 that was saved in parking. The rent itself, we saved $270,000. On the free rent, we saved $190,000. There's $90,000 in savings in TIs, and you come up with total savings in addition to just the rental structure of $563,000. And so you can see that, again, the asking price and rents don't tell you the whole story. And when I tell you rents have dropped 10% on the market, that's not really what's happening. That's just what the data is showing the asking prices are doing.